ঠিক আছে, তানভীর।
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
okay, yeah. I think Professor Said.
already.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, it's already like.
So we are live now.
Hmm.
Okay, great. So I'll just give an introduction. Um, শুভ সন্ধ্যা। জুমে যারা যুক্ত হয়েছেন এবং পাশাপাশি যারা লাইভ স্ট্রিমিং দেখছেন, we got Professor Said Abdullah Said today with us. He was a professor at the English Language and Foreign Language University, Bangalore, India. Before that, he has taught at Aligarh University. And unlike the most of the academic philosophers, he's interested not only confined in philosophy in a narrow sense, he's also interested in the peripheral discipline like this democracy and secularism, pluralism, along with the epistemology and logic. And Professor Said got an published book on, I think, the theory of knowledge or from a non-reductionist perspective, and along with some many other writings. So today he's going to talk about basically secularism and or pluralism. I'm going to repeat that again, actually, secularism and or pluralism. And where he will be basically exploring the meaning and relevance of secularism and pluralism for a decent society. That's an interesting way of putting it. And just to remind you, most of our audience is familiar that the word secularism first time used by George Jacob Heliot in 1851, where he has defined the word as an anti-Catholicism, like someone who is Protestant, agnostic, or atheist. They all kind of fall under that banner. Even though we know actually that the word secular is far more older than the word secularism, because secularism is only basically 180 years old, probably. And but the secular means basically someone who are in Latin language, actually someone who are involved in worldly issues, even though basically they are praised. Uh, but currently, the secularism has been approached three different way. It could be legally, philosophically, or culturally. Legally, usually it been defined as an separation between state and church, even though we all know actually that the meaning of secularism within the Protestant country is far more different from the Catholic country, where usually been defined as a laicite, and typical example would be in France. And in post-colonial countries, it has taken a different meaning and different context. Probably Professor Said will be covering that. And also philosophically, it's kind of connected to the Enlightenment project, and the core idea somehow very much connected with the new humanism, to be precise. And the culturalism, as we all know, actually highly connected with the project is nationalism. And whereas he's also connecting the idea with the pluralism, which we know basically that the state should ensure that all religious practitioner can practice their religion, along with basically having some safeguard to protect individual from the religion itself. So it has an by condition too. So I wouldn't take longer than that. I would request Professor Said to start his talk, and he's going to give us and basically talk about basically meaning and relevance of secularism and pluralism within probably special reference to the India.
Thank you, Dr. Niza, uh, for your very kind introduction. And also my thanks to my student, Samjeer Ahmed, for taking the initiative for this talk. First of all, I would like to say this is not a lecture, uh, except in some technical subjects where an expert may lecture to his students or his audience. Except on those occasions, I think that lectures are, uh, condescending kinds of things. So this is not a lecture. In the other sense as well, that this is not a prepared, structured uh, speech or talk. It is talk in the literal sense, like a chat with friends. So it will be informal. and I may meander, digress. You'll have to bear with me. Just as when you are sitting around with your friends, we do not, when you're chatting with your friends, you do not prepare. Uh, in that sense, you could say that this is extempore. Though I know what the topic is that I agreed to speak on. The first thing, before I talk about secularism, pluralism, uh, I think that in a democracy, particularly, and democracy is non negotiable. In a democracy, it is important that every single citizen, whatever their supposed level of intelligence, education, or anything else, should be able to participate in the conversation of civil society. That means that they should be able to think for themselves. The importance of this prerequisite has not often been recognized. If you look carefully, we have never been allowed to think for ourselves. Earlier, religion used to tell us what to think, what to believe. They offered to think on our behalf. And then later, politicians, experts, they took the right to think for us. And now, with artificial intelligence, Google and Microsoft are offering to do our thinking for us. And when Google and Microsoft come with a gift, we should know what that means. So I believe that we have to revive the culture of simple, ordinary thinking among ordinary people. Uh, in this context, I would like to also point out that the fundamental task of education is to teach people to think. As an academic myself, I confess to my abiding shame that the entire educational system, almost all over the world, has failed in this one task for which educational institutions were established. Oh, people have warned, people like Einstein, too, various people, wise people have pointed out that this idea that education is about knowledge, that this is senseless. It trivializes the real function of educational institutions. And even after technological changes forced academia to revisit the fundamental function of an educational institution, of the classroom, we haven't learned the lesson. More than 20 years ago, we realized that thanks to the internet, whatever I as a teacher can tell my students in the classroom, they can Google and get that knowledge probably better presented from various sources. Still, we went on giving lectures in the classroom. And now, with artificial intelligence, whatever we call analysis or something else, AI seems to be able to do that. In all this, my point is that we must start a movement of thinking, the culture of thinking. And here I do not mean any sophisticated thinking that is supposed to be done by great thinkers, philosophers, intellectuals. I mean ordinary thinking of the ordinary people. This has what this means is that unlike some technical, intricate subjects, maybe quantum physics or something else, matters of universal human concerns should be accessible to every single citizen, every single individual. By accessible, I mean they should be intelligible to them. That we write research articles on the concerns of ordinary people in such a way that only a handful of that circle understands that arcane stuff. And it is impossible to even translate it into a language, into an idiom, in terminology that the people whom it concerns can understand. It could be, take domestic violence. We should be able to explain what it means, what its implications are, what are the rights, in such a way that, like, I'm a middle class person living alone, so I have domestic help. So I should be, if I cannot explain to my domestic help what is domestic violence or what is marital rape, what are her rights, what is right and wrong, is there a balanced position? If I say, no, no, it's all very sophisticated, very complex, you will not understand. I'll tell you what to do. This is unacceptable. We should all try to help our fellow citizens, fellow human beings, to think for themselves, take decisions for themselves. This means, as I have suggested in a couple of pieces I have written, it means that we must change our idea of the intellectual, the public intellectual. Till now, the idea is that intellectual is a certain class of people, very educated, very enlightened, uh, and they are supposed to tell us uh, what everything is about. They are the opinion makers. But that is not viable in a democracy. It is not desirable anyway. To be an intellectual is a function, it's a task. It is to help the people around you, in your vicinity, to help them to be able to think. Unless we all make a commitment that no matter how ignorant you are yourself, no matter how unintelligent, uninformed, ignorant you are yourself. If you find someone who is even more confused than you should help that person, not by telling them what to do, not by telling them what is good for them, but to help them learn to think. So, in this talk, I don't want to tell you what is pluralism, what is secularism, which is better, can they be combined. I don't think that that's the right way. We need to be able to, each of us, think, encourage, exhort other people to think at all times. Without this, there is no meaningful democracy or what I call a decent society possible. Then I will now I'll talk about secularism and pluralism. Of course, a lot has been written about these topics. People have said a lot of sophisticated, complex stuff, full of learned jargon and very complex arguments. The unfortunate thing is that very little of it, if at all, is accessible to ordinary people. If the people of a country need to make decisions about what they want, they should be able to understand what is secularism, what is pluralism, what is nationalism, what is patriotism, etc., etc., and what is democracy. They should know. It is their right to know because it is their right to make informed decisions about their own destiny, about their own lives. So I say, let us talk about secularism, pluralism, even if it is not very precise, even if it's not very sophisticated, in a way that everybody can understand. So, in a way, I'm not trying to tell you anything. I am using this occasion to urge you, to exhort you, to spread this culture of ordinary people understanding what these things are so that they can decide what they want. Now, secularism, it's a basic distinction about which I think needless confusion has been created. Secularism is a matter of state doctrine. Just 1 second, the background. I'm sorry. It is secularism is a state doctrine. It is the doctrine of the government. That is a state, whether it is a religious state, a Hindu state, or an Islamic state, or a Christian state. Almost all Western countries, as we know, are Christian states, even if they don't say so in so many words. But that is the reality. I'll give you an example. When Obama became the president, everybody was how great he was, comparing him to Lincoln and so on. Fine. Then somebody started saying he is actually a Muslim. Now, what I found disappointing is not that he went to elaborate lengths to prove that he is not a Muslim. That's fine. You're not a Muslim, and if somebody says you are a Muslim, you want to correct the misunderstanding. But what is significant is he did not say, it is inconceivable that he could have said, all right, for the sake of argument, supposing I am a Muslim, what is the big deal about it? I'm the same person you have known, about whom you know all the details, and you have elected me to be the president of this country. You have placed trust in me. And just because now you discover that I call God by a certain name and pray to him or her or it in a certain manner, why should that make a difference? He didn't have the courage to say that, because the truth is that these are Christian states. It's up to them. The people of those countries want it that way. And there are some Islamic countries where, if truth be told, the people don't want it that way, but that's how they are. So, either the state, the government, is a religious state in the sense that it identifies itself with a certain religion, and it not only favors it, it becomes imbricated with the state ideology, the state doctrine, the way it treats the different groups of people in that country. In contrast to this, a country can choose to be secular. That is, the government chooses to be secular in the sense that it does not profess or embrace any particular religion. It remains a-religious as a matter of principle. So only governments are secular or non-secular. To say a person is secular is meaningless. People are not secular or non-secular. They are not. It is simply a matter of a government policy, a state policy. So you can say this government is secular, that government is not secular. But to say about a person, oh, he is secular, it has no meaning. Yes, you can say he is a secularist in the sense that he believes that his country, her country, should be secular, that her government should be secular. In that case, that person holds the position that the government of the country should not have any official state religion, that the state should be secular. That does not make her secular or otherwise. So, secularism, that is the subject of secularism, is the state, just as true or false are properties of a proposition. A proposition is true or false, meaningful or meaningless. A table cannot be true or false. So we have to ask, what is the subject of this attribute? It is the state which has the attribute of being religious, theocratic, or secular. Now, a society can be pluralist. And what do we mean when we say pluralist? I think it simply means, as I told you, I may be imprecise, but I want to speak a language which, with little modification, can be used to convey this to ordinary people, people from villages, people who are uneducated, people we think are not highly intelligent. They are citizens. They have a right to understand. So I am deliberately, if you may feel that I am being simplistic, but it is deliberate that people have some understanding is important. Pluralism, seen that way, is simply the attitude of respect for difference. It is simply to say, all right, that person is many ways different from me, but why can't we live together? Why can't we live in the same country, sharing the same joys and sorrows of life? Pluralism is just that, nothing more than that. So, any sensible person would be a pluralist, should be a pluralist. But now comes the question, then why is pluralism so appears so difficult to practice, so difficult to implement? The answer lies, and here I shouldn't be surprised if most of you disagree with me, that the problem in all this is a scourge of humankind called identity, in particular, cultural, in the broad sense, cultural identity. Identity has been, for centuries now, almost the sole root cause of all strife, all misery, all violence. We have now come to fetishize identity, glorified it, become super sentimental about it, and not been able to see ultimately how irrelevant, how inconsequential, how trivial it is. Now, there are two main aspects to identity. One is the identity of myself as I see it, feel it within myself. I could be hopelessly wrong, but there is a certain identity in the sense of a certain sense of I, the center of my personality, my consciousness. That is one sense of identity. The other identity is external, how you appear to other people, your actions, your practices, and your stated beliefs, your lifestyle, and so on. Now, it is the conflation of these two identities in an incoherent way that has been the source of all problems. Like, I would say, there is a human being, and that human being chooses to live as a man or a woman or some other gender. Whether a person wants to have sex with another man or a woman or if she chooses with a dinosaur, how is that relevant? How is it any of anybody else's business? We Now we find ourselves in a situation, we demand a label for ourselves, for other people, and we form identity groups, which inevitably turn into pressure groups of one kind or the other. The identities of religion, of caste, of ethnicity look everywhere. And this is something people refuse to understand, not fail to understand, but refuse to understand. When in private conversations, I try to give the examples of India, Pakistan, or India, Bangladesh, or something else, uh, as you understand, these are thorny subjects, examples. So I give them, some of you, I'm sure, know that in India, in South India, there was a river dispute about the waters of a river called Kaveri, which flows in the southern part of the Indian peninsula. It flows through mainly two states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. Now, there were riots, there was violence about how much water should each state get. Now look at it. The only difference between these two people, the people of Karnataka and the people of Tamil Nadu, is mainly just that they speak a different language. In other matters, the differences are hardly discernible. Now, when somebody says that Tamil speaking farmer should get the water, or the Kannada speaking farmer should get the water, how more bizarre can it get? What's the difference? Why should the language that person speaks be such an important factor? Whoever needs should get as much of the water, part of the water, share of the water available. But if we are not able to help people, make people sit down, reflect, and ask themselves, what exactly are you thinking when you say, no, that farmer should not get the water because he speaks Tamil? And you look at whatever is happening, either in between Israel, Palestine, Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, or China, Taiwan, anywhere, there are no stakes. There was a time when an individual or a group of individuals went invading other people for some tangible gains, wealth, land, something else. Sometimes just the perverse pleasure of having conquered that land, with which they do not know what to do. Alexander, the so called the Great, he went on a conquering spree, but he was a madman. That's fine. But the soldiers who followed him, for years, leaving their families behind with his expedition, what did they want? Did they want to loot and take back gold, diamonds, wealth, whatever it is? Did they really think that they go all the way to Egypt and the Indus River and loot gold and carry it on their shoulders back to Greece, Macedonia? What did they want? What did they expect? Aside from nominally saying, now I'm your boss, most of the countries were left as they were. But most of the wars were for land, for resources, sometimes even, as we know from history, spices, something. But today's wars and conflicts, they are not for tangible gains. At the most, or almost always, they are nothing but xenophobic struggles. The strife is nothing but looking at the other person as the other. And that sense of the other, which unfortunately is useful in consolidating a sense of one's own self and one's own community, that is highlighted, that is magnified to an extent that the other becomes the enemy, the evil, the bad, the undesirable, something, someone who necessarily has to be decimated. You look at all kinds of internal, external strifes. It all boils down to this needless, unnecessary disease called identity. The identity politics, whether within a country or you look at across the world, they're ultimately based on some distinctions to do with identity, cultural identity, essentially, or ethnic identity, and nothing else. It's not as if he has harmed you or you have harmed him. There is no what they call casus belli, whatever the term, Latin term is. There is no bone of contention. You're not fighting for anything. You're not fighting over anything. How many wars that are happening now, how many riots, how many lynchings, how many whatever violent clashes. Think of how many of them are about something, for something. There is no, and the tendencies are increasing now. And authoritarian figures all over the world are exploiting them. Today, to put it with let's say, risky bluntness. It is today, it is the West versus the rest. The rest have not woken up to that fact, but that has been so for the past few hundred years. But that again is so sad because ultimately there is no difference. And once we see that these differences are just notional, symbolic, ultimately constructs which may be useful in some context, but should not be allowed to be made the grounds of our collective existence. This is something we should be able to explain to each other so that the simplest of us understands and begins to reflect. Until that happens, we give blank checks to governments, politicians, to, for their own ends, exploit these sentiments. So, this is the hindrance to pluralism. It is not that you pretend that there is no difference, you see the irrelevance of the difference. We, once we understand this, when I say we, all ordinary people like us, not just so called intellectuals, understand it, are given the opportunity to the climate to think about it, then it is a very simple matter to work out strategies of coexistence. One is a vegetarian, the other is a non vegetarian. One is somebody who keeps awake the whole night, and somebody who sleeps at 8 o'clock and wakes up at 4 a.m. There could be so many differences of lifestyle, habits, beliefs, practices. One can work out strategies once we understand that it is like logistical arrangements. It is simply a matter of sensible organization, sensible management. So, to think that there is that uh, these pluralism and secularism are mutually exclusive, or that there is a painful choice that awaits us, I think rests on a confusion. A democratic state should be, in any country today which is multicultural, essentially every country is multicultural in the sense that it has multiple identities. There are people of different religions, food habits, uh, psychological divergences. So, a democracy should be pluralistic. And if it's the health of the pluralistic society is to be safeguarded, the state should be secular in the simple sense that it does not uphold, embrace one religion and give it a privileged position. Whatever else it does comes from according one religion a privileged status. Once we make sure that the state remains, whether it is equidistant or something else, all that is secondary. The state itself should take care of the business of making the life of its citizens easier. That is its only mandate. It has no business to meddle in other things. So one has to tell the government, you are there only to make our lives better, ease our suffering and hardship a little as much as possible. So, what I have said is hardly enough. Probably some of it you may disagree with. Maybe it is wrong. But more than the question of secularism, pluralism, or anything, my sincere request, my exhortation to you is these are matters which we must cultivate the habit of speaking in terms which every single person can understand and think about. And I'm not so naively optimistic as to imagine that, oh, in the next 5 years or 10 years, people will begin to sit down, set aside their emotions, think coolly in a sober way. No, but all evolutionary changes take time. Unlike revolutions, which invariably deliver monsters, the evolutionary approach, it gives healthy results, but takes a long time. And I think most of us here are committed to academics, to teaching. That means we are committed to the belief that to make people think, to change from inside, is the best way to move forward, and not through what Arthur Kessler called the commissar approach, where somebody supposedly superior to you tells you to do and you have to obey them. Thank you for your time and more than that, for your patience. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Professor Said. It was very lively and thought-provoking in many ways, actually. So, the floor is open. Anyone can like come up with a question or ask question to Professor Said. So, probably I'll ask a question to start with. Professor Said, I was just wondering actually that in one sense, actually, that foreign democratic societies, obviously, that it would be a pluralistic society and some form of basically that secularistic view it will uphold. But in a way, sometimes I wonder that suppose like in democracy, there are a number of political parties, and the easiest way for them to like address a branch of or group of people actually, either it could be language, ethnicity, or religion. So, isn't it obvious actually in a functional democracy, especially uh, like some things to some extent, actually, we kind of an experience that the religion will be addressed by the political parties. So that isn't it the inevitable consequence of the democracy?
Uh, yeah, if I have understood you correctly, it is what in a vulgar way called vote bank politics.
Yes, that's what I was indicating. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Now, here again, forgive me if I begin to be preachy, like all old men. I become preachy at times. Like, take democracy, representative democracy. I tell my students we should be able to explain what is democracy and how the existing so called democracies are caricatures, dangerous, manipulative distortions of it. So, let's say if there is this person who is not educated from a village and not necessarily a super intellectual, I'm speaking to him and I give him this example. Your village has drinking water problem. There is no proper facility for potable water. So you villagers decide that you must go and speak to the district magistrate or the collector, whatever district authority, and request him to do something about it. So they have to go to the district headquarters, to the office of that a district magistrate, whoever, and explain to him the difficulty and request him to do something about it. Somebody says, look, if all of us go there as a crowd, then probably they will throw you out and it will be chaotic. So let just one of us go there and express our view and express our demand. So then the question is, who should go? Some people say that, well, look, the school teacher or the postmaster, he knows how to talk. He is also a villager, part of this village. So let him go, speak to him. So they go to him and request him. He will say, yeah, I'll go, but look, once I go there, I take the bus in the morning, and then the day I go, I may not be given appointment to meet the collector. And it will be very strenuous. Of course, it's also my problem, my family's problem. But for this trouble, you will have to give me some 100 taka or whatever for my bus fare, for my lunch in the city, etc. So they would say, yeah, understand, you have to go, and we trust you that you will, in a articulate, sensible way, express our problem, and hopefully he will be receptive. Now, this man has been persuaded, and everybody agreed that we'll give him some money for his journey to the town. Now, in the meantime, the rich landlord of the village, he secretly calls people one by one and says, I will give each of you 100 takas. You let me go to speak to the collector. And this rich landlord never ever helped anybody. And if you give away money left and right, you don't become rich in the first place. So the rich man offers 100 rupees, 100 taka, whatever, a substantial amount to each of the villagers secretly, saying, send me, I will go speak to the collector. Then it should occur to us, like, why is he paying us money to take the trouble to go and convey our demand to the collector? Why is he suddenly so eager to serve us that he is ready to spend so much money from his pocket? This is exactly what we see in our democracies today. It is officially acknowledged that in any of these countries, you cannot become a representative of the people without spending not lakhs, crores of rupees. The question is, why would anybody be? Why is suddenly he so eager to serve the people? So I'm saying that we have to educate is a slightly condescending term, but we have to ourselves learn to think and speak in such a way that we help people see. I'll give you, I'm sorry to give such a long answer, but then since there don't seem to be any more questions, take, I have been become uh, abused and all for just saying this. Take women's reservation. Now, it's not that I have a problem with women's reservation, but I ask, what exactly is the point, the rationale of this demand? When we elect a representative, a member of parliament, she is supposed to take an oath that she represents all the people of the constituency. And as the part of the collective decision making, she also takes oath that without fear or favor or discrimination or partiality, she will do what is good for all the people of the country. So, aside from just being symbolic, what is the substantial gain? Because you are undermining the very idea that a representative should not, need not have anything in common with those whom she represents. She cannot have an identity as a representative. She is just the voice of the people of the constituency. Now, once people understand this, when somebody says, look, I'm of your caste, I'm of your region, I speak your language, people then have to understand what has that got to do with your being a representative. Your job is to go speak there in the parliament or whichever body about what we want. How does it matter what your identity is? We want to be sure that you will sincerely, without any vested interest, speak there about what we want, what we need. So I'm saying that ultimately it comes back to it may sound simplistic. It is perhaps simplistic. But I'm trying to say that none of these things are so complex or intricate that they cannot be explained to all the citizens of a country.
Well, thank you. I got you. Just to share some experience from our side, actually. Unlike
Ah,
the Indian constitution, where basically in preamble the secularism word appears without any explanation within the constitution, but in our current constitution, which was basically accepted in 1972, it has some explanation within it. Actually, not only it appears in the preamble, also within basically the fundamental principle that along that there is some form of explanation. There are some things very interesting in many ways. And
mhm.
unlike the European or even Indian way of interpreting the secularism, is slightly different. So the Bangladesh was dealing actually is in non-communalism because we know what had happened during the colonial period. Actually, the
Mhm.
community have been basically segregated, and basically legal system in many ways feed that, and also the politics. So the non-communalism is highly emphasized. So it's in Article 12 of our Constitution, where the secularism is defined as, and basically perhaps I shouldn't use the word secularism, and it's better to use the dharma nirapekha, the word usually being used, and I think probably you do understand that dharma means religion and nirapekha means in the neutrality. But the way it was defined actually that it's as a non-communalist, so you cannot feed the communalism actually. And that's the first, the A of the basically Article 12. In C was very important, the last one actually, the way was, so it was prohibited to form a political party based on the religion actually. So the for a long period of time, in Bangladesh, basically, it wasn't legalized to have a political party with particularly address and religious connotation. Even though basically the Article 12 was kind of suspended for certain decades actually in 80s and reintroduced later on in middle of basically I think the decade back actually around 2011 or so. So it has a kind of an experiment was been through. And it's a question basically how successful we was actually about that. And so I think there are other people has raised their hand actually. Probably the Shamjir wanted to ask a question. Yeah.
Yeah, before that, I would like to quickly respond to what you said. Yes, what you said is a very important point. But this is the problem, that you can ban parties with religious identity or affiliations. But how to prevent the individual candidates from using their religious identity or some other identity to attract voters?
That was the question of mine, actually. Yeah, because it's in
So,
democracy, it seems, and kind of an we can say basically paradox related to democratic paradox related to secularism or pluralism in many ways. Oh, I got a like different take on this sort of issues actually, but probably it's an this issue to discuss some other time.
sure.
But yeah, sure, yeah. But I got your point for what you were suggesting. Yeah, sure. I think, yes, I think some did probably like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. So it's a very special moment for me that yeah, and I have attended 5 courses with Professor Saib, but I have never heard him talk for a long time because he used to ask us questions in the class. So it's in a sense it's a really a special occasion, and now I have got the chance to ask questions. So it's a he used to ask all the questions. So now uh, uh, I have 2 points. One is that in our in the present political context in Bangladesh, the war, I think the secularism is going to be replaced by, or it is proposed to be replaced with pluralism for our constitution. So, according to you, pluralism, if it's a principle, then it's a principle for the society or the person, not the state. So, when we are replacing secularism with pluralism for the constitution, uh, what it means and what it's going to. And the second question is that uh, people argue it's a very current argument in Bangladesh that secularism is a kind of Western idea, and it has a Western genius. So in the Eastern world, and we should not accept secularism because it's a kind of Christian idea. So I would like to just I'm expecting your response on this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, look, this talk about how secularism is a Western concept and we should have our own indigenous concepts. This is for another day, but a lot of it is frankly rubbish. Um, the content of a concept and how it is connected to the other concepts in a conceptual structure is what matters, not its provenance. And two, there is no need to be hung up on words. The Constitution can simply say there shall be no official religion of the state. You don't have to talk about secularism or anything. The point is that the state will not have an official religion, nor will it privilege any religion above others in all its functions, in all its organs. That takes care of it. And pluralism is, like I said, it is a matter of people learning to accept, unless they are violent or dangerous or seriously unhealthy or something. Pluralism is a matter of learning to adjust, give and take, understand, empathize, and say, all right, we are all in the same boat of misery, human suffering. So let's live together, adjust a little bit, as you try to adjust in a crowded train. So the Constitution cannot talk about pluralism. It is for the people to learn to live together. The state can only create a conducive atmosphere, mostly negatively. That is, if you do not deliberately create rifts, highlight differences in a colored way, nefariously suggesting that the other is necessarily your antagonist. If the state refrains from doing that, it is for the people's sense, good sense, to understand that we have to live together. Whether we live together, caring for each other, understanding each other's constraints, or respecting each other's beliefs. So the state cannot and should not legislate and say, the people of this country shall be pluralistic. The state has no business to give any such dictate to the people. Ultimately, the good sense of the people, the sense of fairness, the sense of justice, the sense of humaneness of the people. A society is as decent as only that much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think Saviapa has asked a question. Sir, you are muted.
Who, me?
No,
No, no, no.
not,
It's
yeah,
that's
neither,
a
sir.
problem. My no phone. Sorry. So yeah. So who is like to go next?
Sorry.
Sir, I'm going to ask a
Sir,
question to you.
sir, Sabiapa asked a question. You will find it in the chat box.
Oh
So
yeah.
could you please
Okay.
read out? Yeah.
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 And
Sure.
then you can
Can
ask.
anybody read it out?
So I think the professor like Savia Hawk actually.
Oh, okay.
She's
Yeah, it
speaking
says I
about
have
breaking.
a rather naive question. Why is it we are witnessing a gradual decrease of public ethic, of humility, that you claim to be a fundamental for the intellectuals? And why are we seeing diversity becoming a threat to peace and stability in the majoritarian national imaginary part? Is it only the lack of legal or constitutional guarantee of equal citizenship or something else?
So
Look,
I think I might contextualize this question actually because as you
uh-huh.
know, after last August actually. Uh, we are going through a lots of like debate we are facing actually, and there is an in some form of raise of actually that communal violence at the initial level, and later on it was kind of and came down. But the intellectuals and a number of intellectuals actually they are not only kind of an attacking secularism in many ways, uh, but also in a way actually that. Religious imperatives actually becoming and more powerful in narratives. And probably she was like pointing out that issue just to contextualize the
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Look, it's not about humility. Like I said, there is no such thing as an intellectual class. Intellectual is not the name of an individual. It is not a description of an attribute of an individual. It is the name of a function, like nursing is the name of a function. When we say a nurse, we are referring to a certain function. not to any qualities of the person. So, if there is a qualified nurse, well and good. If not, if somebody in our family falls sick, we do the nursing as best as we can. So, intellectual is a function. You are an intellectual if you are trying to explain or help people understand, whoever around you, understand and think. So, if anybody in Bangladesh or anywhere else calls himself an intellectual and tells people what they should think, what position they should adopt, he is not an intellectual. And it is the duty of the rest of us to say that an intellectual, in the true sense of that term, has something like what Keats called the negative capability. He may have his own opinions, his own belief systems. Like, I think most of us here are teachers, are students. I have my own, maybe ideological biases, my transcendental beliefs. But when I go into the class, it is my sacred duty to keep them aside and help my students think on their own, come to their own conclusions. And if I think that they are confused, they are incoherent, making mistakes of reasoning, or they have not taken something into account, I nudge and guide them. In the classroom, I, as a matter of principle, refuse to tell them what my own position is on something. So if some intellectual says that is not right, or secularism is not right, or something else is good, and everybody should follow it, then such a person should be boycotted.
I think like we got few more people to ask. Milan, would you like to go ahead?
Uh, Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are.
you're.
Shamla is
First of all, my
loudspeaker.
apologies because my internet connection was kind of unstable, so I might have missed.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's
I
that's
might.
perfectly fine.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Hello, Professor Said. My name is Misbah. I teach English at a university here in Bangladesh. Uh, if I have heard you correctly or grasped your ideas, like you were talking about situations where a representative in a democratic condition is not required to identify herself with the community she is supposed to represent. Am I correct? Like
Uh,
cultural,
Say
like
again.
a representative who is supposed to represent a community in a democratic country. Uh,
Hmm.
if I have heard you correctly, probably you were saying that she is not bound to identify herself culturally or sexually in terms of orientation, of course, or in terms of religious belief with the community that she is representing.
Look, what I mean is that if you take a constituency, let's say in a country like India, it doesn't consist of people only either men or women or Hindus or Muslims or professionals or businessmen or laborers or something else, right? There are all kinds of people in a constituency, and all of them vote for that person, or the majority votes for her. Then she is duty bound without any discrimination to represent all of them.
Yes, I do agree with what you said, Professor. But in situations that we experience in this subcontinent, is like if I if I represent a community and if I subscribe to an ideology that does not necessarily is in line with the ideology that a particular community subscribes to, then sometimes isn't it a situation like uh, where as a representative or as a member of parliament or something like that, I find myself in a situation, I could find myself in a situation where some sort of antipathy could be there. Like if I subscribe to ideology that is really antagonistic to the ideology of the people that I'm representing, isn't it there a chance that I might develop some sort of antipathy towards the people, and I really don't myself find connected to the people that I'm representing?
Look, I don't think that there are representatives of communities anywhere in the subcontinent. Uh, that's number one. I don't think that we have, at least in the subcontinent, degenerated to a point where any group of people with a common identity demand that only one of them can represent them. That way, when teachers will demand that a teacher has to represent them, gay people will say only a gay person should represent them. And there is no end to it because there'll be subdivisions within them. So, to say that there is a representative of a community, the notion itself goes against the logic of representation. Representation is not a matter of commonality. It, it, is, it is simply incidental. Your representative may be one of you or may not be one of you. What is important is that representative should, in all sincerity, without any other ulterior motive, represent. So a representation need not have any commonality, and if it is there, it should be treated as incidental. And two, when you talk about ideology, now this term has been used as careless synonym for belief system, to political program, to a lot of things. So we have to be a little clear what we mean by ideology. Here, when we say that the representative's ideology is different from yours, but in real situations, there is one ideology that is of the ruling party, and they will implement their ideology because the people have opted for that ideology or that ideological agenda. So, what uh, what is the way to deal with conflicting ideological structures? That is a different question, a slightly more complex question.
Thank you,
Did I
Professor.
answer
Yes,
your
yes,
question
more
at
or
all?
less. But maybe if we find any other session with you, maybe we can discuss on that later as well. But thank you for your kind answer, Professor.
Welcome.
I
So
think
I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm Monirul Islam. I have recently completed my MA from Cultural Studies Department, AFLU. So you are
Mhm.
familiar to me. So my question is sometimes I think we have experienced that democracy or secularism, some secularism failure to solve our problems. And usually we address that it is very loaded with coloniality or colonial natures. So my question is, what is your experience? Do you find these issues that our democracy and secularism is very loaded with coloniality or colonial questions? That's why I think it is not usable or it is not working for our issues or to solve our question or solve our problems. in a very specific way, do you find any issues with democracy or secularism very related with coloniality or colonial in characters? That's why we are, I think, uh, these ideas are not helping us.
Look, see, this is my real issue. What I try to keep repeating ad nauseum. All this talk about coloniality, the post colonial, ultimately it is irrelevant. You tell me how you will explain this to an ordinary person. This is, it has nothing to do with what is democracy. Democracy is representative democracy because direct democracy of the Athenian kind, not that it was ideal, it excluded women, the slaves, and so on, but it was direct. So we have indirect representative democracy. Ultimately, the principle of democracy is that the people of a particular region should have the right to decide in what conditions they want to live, how they want to live, how they want to improve the conditions of their existence. And secularism of the state is necessary because there are always people who are different from each other in some sense or the other. So the state should not only be secular, I would say it should be non sectarian. That, whether in terms of sexual orientation, profession, religion, ethnicity, language, in any way, the state should uphold the principle of a non sectarian attitude. It is essential unless the society is a homogeneous, monolithic demographic. There are men, there are women, there are laborers, there are rich people. So there are different people with different outlooks, different needs. The like I, it may sound like a piece of sentimental nonsense, but I often find myself saying that the fortunate and the unfortunate live in different worlds and speak different languages and cannot understand each other. So, no matter how much we try, the poor and the downtrodden, they live in a world, they speak a language, they think in a language that the rich, the fortunate, the successful, the powerful will not find it easy to understand, no matter how much they stretch their capacity for empathy. So the state should be impartial, non sectarian. So to ask, is secularism democracy? No. Democracy is simply a recognition that the individual is the sovereign entity. All else, all collectives are secondary, be it a community or a family or anything else. That ultimately it is an individual who should be recognized as a whole, as a complete entity, and that the unit of a country should be a citizen. And a citizen, by definition, has no qualities. A citizen is just a citizen. There is nothing like a male citizen, female citizen, rich citizen, poor citizen. A citizen has no other attribute. A citizen, by virtue of a citizen, has certain rights and, of course, certain duties. That so it democracy is a matter of making a citizen, individual citizen, the basic unit, the fundamental unit of the country, of the society.
I think like the Ifshita Chandra, he or she like to ask a question. Would you like to go
Sir,
ahead, please?
sir, before that, we know that Professor Syed is a bit under the weather. So,
Okay.
yeah, maybe we should consider ending this session, and then
Yeah,
we can go. Yeah.
maybe some other time
Oh,
you'll be able to have a chance to interact.
yeah,
Uh,
sure. Yeah,
Thank you
probably.
all for so graciously listening to me. I hope it was at least a little bit worth your time. Thank you so much.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Professor Said, and we are really grateful to you actually for this talk. And we suppose we'll be get connected with you soon at some stage. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. Wish
Thank
you
you, sir.
all the best.
Tanvir, would you like, Tanvir, can you stop the streaming, please?
And then
Yeah.
we can